I'm a grocery store clerk who survived the first 12 hours of the alien invasion, and this is my story. Before I begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. It was 10:37 a.m. when it happened. I remember looking up at the clock above the customer service desk, annoyed that my lunch break was still almost an hour away. The fluorescent lights of Valley Fresh Market buzzed overhead as I scanned a family-sized box of cereal and smiled mechanically at the woman in front of me. Paper or plastic? I asked for what felt like the 1,000th time that morning. That's when the first tremor hit. My name is Marcus Chen, 5 years working at the same grocery store while trying to finish my online degree in computer science. 5 years of the same routine: stocking shelves, operating the register, dealing with complaints about expired coupons. Nothing in those 5 years could have prepared me for what came next. The tremor was subtle at first, just enough to make the bottles of soda rattle in their displays. The woman at my register gripped the counter, her knuckles whitening. "Earthquake?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "I don't think so," I replied, though I had no reason to believe otherwise. Denver wasn't exactly known for seismic activity, but what else could make the ground shake like that? Then the second tremor hit, stronger than the first. Somewhere in the store, glass shattered. The overhead lights flickered. My manager, Dave, a balding man with perpetual sweat stains under his arms, hustled to the front of the store, walkie-talkie in hand. "Everyone stay calm," he announced, his voice carrying none of the reassurance his words intended. "We're experiencing some sort of disturbance. Please finish your transactions and exit in an orderly fashion." The woman at my register abandoned her groceries and headed for the exit, along with a stream of other customers. I couldn't blame them. The vibrations were intensifying, the fluorescent lights now strobing like we were in some apocalyptic nightclub. My coworker Zoe rushed over from Register 3, her dark curls bouncing with each hurried step. "Marcus, check your phone. Something's happening downtown." I pulled out my phone to find it flooded with emergency alerts. The first one caught my eye: unknown aerial phenomena over Denver. Seek shelter immediately. Before I could process what that meant, the store's automatic doors slid open, and Eric from the liquor store next door burst in, his face ashen. "You guys need to see this," he gasped. "Right now." A small group of us, me, Zoe, Dave, and a few customers who hadn't fled yet, followed Eric outside into the parking lot. That's when I saw them for the first time. They weren't the flying saucers of sci-fi movies or the sleek ships of modern CGI. They were organic somehow. Massive, undulating shapes hovering above downtown Denver, about 5 miles from our suburban shopping center. They reminded me of jellyfish, if jellyfish were the size of skyscrapers and metallic black in color, with tendrils that reached toward the ground like probing fingers. "What the hell are those things?" Dave whispered, all pretense of managerial authority gone from his voice. As we watched, one of the tendrils touched the top of what I recognized as the Wells Fargo Center. There was a flash of blue-white light, and half the building seemed to disintegrate, collapsing in on itself in a cloud of dust and debris that was visible even from our distance. "Oh my God," Zoe breathed. "They're attacking. This is an invasion." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Invasion. Aliens. The stuff of movies and books, now unfolding in real time against the Denver skyline. A deafening sound cut through the air, a citywide emergency siren I'd only ever heard during monthly tests. Then came the unmistakable roar of fighter jets. 3 of them streaked across the sky toward the hovering entities. "We should get back inside," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Whatever those things are, standing in the open watching them isn't smart." Dave nodded, seemingly grateful for someone else taking charge. "Everyone back inside. We'll use the store as a shelter until we know more." As we hurried back toward the entrance, I caught a glimpse of the jets engaging the alien craft. One fired a missile that streaked toward the nearest jellyfish-like entity. There was a flash as it struck, but when the light faded, the creature appeared completely unharmed. A tendril lashed out with impossible speed, wrapping around the jet. The aircraft crumpled like an aluminum can in a fist, then exploded in a fireball. Inside, chaos had taken over. The few remaining customers were grabbing supplies: water, canned goods, batteries. One man had an entire shopping cart filled with bottled water and was trying to push it toward the exit. "Hey," Dave called after him. "You need to pay for that." Even in the face of apparent alien invasion, Dave was still worried about shoplifting. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. "Dave," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "I think the rules just changed. Forever." As if to punctuate my statement, the power went out. The store plunged into semi-darkness, the only light coming from the large front windows and emergency exit signs. "Backup generator should kick in," Dave muttered, but it never did. My phone buzzed with another emergency alert. Citywide evacuation order. Proceed to designated emergency shelters. Do not attempt to leave the city. Roads are closed. I showed it to Zoe and Dave. "What do we do?" "I'm leaving," said Tyler from the deli counter, already removing his apron. "My kids are at school. I need to get to them." Several other employees nodded in agreement, and within minutes, half our staff was gone, hurrying to their cars despite the evacuation order's warning about roads. "We should stay here," I suggested to those remaining. "The store has food, water, it's sturdy. We can wait it out until we know more about what's happening." Dave, seemingly relieved at having a plan, nodded enthusiastically. "Marcus is right. We'll secure the store, take inventory of supplies. We could help a lot of people if things get bad." The next hour was a blur of activity. We closed the large front shutters that usually only came down after closing time, leaving only the main entrance accessible. We took inventory of our supplies, focusing on essentials: water, non-perishable food, first aid supplies, batteries, flashlights. We cleared space in the employee break room and manager's office to create sleeping areas. Throughout it all, we tried to get information from our phones, but self-service was becoming increasingly spotty. The news was fragmented and terrifying. Similar craft had appeared over major cities worldwide. Military responses had been ineffective. There were reports of strange creatures emerging from the ships, though no clear images or descriptions. Around noon, a new wave of people arrived at the store, locals seeking shelter or supplies. We let them in, trying to maintain some order as they gathered what they needed. I found myself naturally taking charge, directing people to different sections, making sure the elderly and families with children had access to necessities. "You're good at this," Zoe remarked as we organized a distribution system for the bottled water, limiting it to 2 gallons per person. 5 years in retail, I replied with a grim smile. "You learn how to manage people in a crisis. Usually the crisis is just that we're out of their favorite brand of yogurt." She laughed, but it was hollow. We both kept glancing toward the windows, watching for any sign of the alien craft moving closer to our location. At 1:22 p.m., we got our first direct view of the invaders themselves. A young man burst through the front entrance, his face streaked with dirt and blood. "They're coming," he gasped. "Those things. They're moving through the neighborhoods now." He collapsed into a chair we'd set up near the entrance. Zoe brought him water while I tried to get more information. "What did you see? What do they look like?" "Like nothing from Earth," he stammered after gulping down half the bottle. "They walk on these spindly legs. 6 of them, I think. Bodies like giant insects, but with something like human torsos rising from them. And their faces." He shuddered. "No eyes that I could see. Just these pulsing organs where I should be." "What are they doing?" Dave asked, joining us. "Taking people. They have these weapons. They shoot this web-like substance. It paralyzes you. I saw them cocoon my neighbor right on his front lawn. They're taking people back to their ships, I think." A hush fell over the gathering crowd as this information sank in. This wasn't just destruction, it was collection. Harvesting. "How close?" I asked. "About 10 blocks north of here. They're moving methodically, street by street." I did a quick mental calculation. If they maintained that pace, they could reach our location within a couple of hours. "We need to hide," said an elderly woman who had been listening nearby. Or flee. Panic began to spread through the crowd. People who had been relatively calm now moved toward the exits. Wait, I called out. Running blindly isn't safe. We don't know where they are exactly, but we know they're north of us. If you leave, go south. Some heeded my advice, but many simply fled in whatever direction their cars were parked. I couldn't blame them. The instinct to escape was powerful. For those who remained, about 30 people including staff, we began to formulate a more concrete plan. The store had a large storage basement where we received shipments. It was windowless, with concrete walls and only one access point, a freight elevator and an adjacent stairwell. If we needed to hide, that would be the place. As we organized, I found myself thinking about my apartment, about the computer where my nearly finished thesis was stored, about the photo of my parents who had moved back to Taiwan 2 years ago. I wondered if they were experiencing the same terror halfway across the world, if these aliens had reached them too. At 2:45 p.m., we lost cell service completely. Our last connection to the outside world was severed, leaving us isolated with only the information we had already gathered and the rumors circulating among the sheltering crowd. Some claimed the aliens were using some kind of telepathy to communicate with world leaders. Others said they were releasing a gas that turned people into mindless slaves. Someone had heard they were after Earth's water. No one really knew, and the lack of information only fed the fear. I was checking our barricade at the loading dock when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong in a grocery store. A wet, chittering noise, like hundreds of insects moving in synchronized rhythm. It was coming from the roof. I radioed Zoe, who was organizing supplies in the basement. "Something's on the roof," I whispered, as if whatever was up there might hear me through the ceiling. "Are you sure it's not just the building settling?" she replied, her voice tight with forced calm. Before I could answer, a new sound joined the first, a scraping, drilling noise. They were cutting through the roof. "Everyone to the basement," I shouted, abandoning all pretense of calm as I raced back to the main store area. Now, they're breaking in from above. People moved with surprising speed, parents carrying children, others helping the elderly. I did a quick sweep of the store to ensure no one was left behind, then headed toward the basement stairs myself. I was halfway there when the first section of ceiling collapsed. It fell in a shower of insulation and metal framework, crashing onto the cereal aisle. And through the gap came exactly what our bloodied visitor had described, a creature with a body like a massive spider or tick easily 6 feet across, with 6 articulated legs. But rising from where the head should have been was a torso almost like a human's, but too thin, too angular, with arms that ended in 3-digit hands. Its face was worse than I had imagined. No eyes, as the man had said, but rather pulsating orbs of gelatinous tissue that seemed to expand and contract with each breath. No visible mouth, just a series of vertical slits that vibrated as it produced that terrible chittering sound. It saw me, however it perceived the world, and moved with startling speed down the aisle toward me. In one hand, it carried what looked like a biological weapon, not mechanical but grown, like a hornet's nest shaped into a gun. I didn't wait to see what it fired. I turned and ran, zigzagging through the aisles toward the basement door. Behind me, I heard a wet thwack sound, and something hit the shelf beside me, a glob of translucent, sticky material that began to sizzle and smoke as it ate through the cardboard cereal boxes. The basement door was just ahead. Most of our group had already made it down. Dave was holding it open, waving frantically for me to hurry. I sprinted the last few yards and practically dove through the doorway. Dave slammed it shut behind me, and 2 men from our group immediately pushed a heavy metal shelf in front of it. "What was that thing?" Dave gasped. "Exactly what we were warned about," I panted, trying to catch my breath. "And I don't think our barricade is going to hold it for long." The basement was large, running the length and width of the store above, filled with pallets of extra stock and various supplies. About 30 people huddled in small groups, their faces showing varying degrees of terror. A few emergency lights provided dim illumination, powered by their own battery backups. "There's another way out," I said, remembering the building's layout from my time receiving deliveries. A drainage tunnel that runs under the shopping complex. It lets out near the creek behind the parking lot. How do you know that? Zoe asked. Tyler used to sneak out for cigarette breaks that way. Said the loading dock was too exposed to smokers' shame from passing customers. The drainage tunnel wasn't designed for human passage, but it was large enough that a person could crouch walk through it. The entrance was behind some shelving units in the far corner of the basement, covered by a metal grate that we could remove. We should go now, I suggested, but my words were interrupted by a tremendous crash from upstairs, followed by more of that awful chittering, now coming from multiple sources. They're all inside, whispered a young mother, clutching her child closer. We need a distraction, I said, thinking rapidly. Something to keep them occupied upstairs while we get everyone out through the tunnel. My eyes fell on the store's fire alarm system panel, mounted on the wall near the freight elevator. It controlled not just the alarms, but the sprinkler system as well. Water, I said suddenly. The guy who came in earlier mentioned his neighbor being cocooned on the front lawn. They're operating in the open. What if they don't like water? They certainly don't look waterproof. It was a shot in the dark, but it was all we had. I moved to the control panel and hit the override for the sprinkler system. Immediately, we could hear the hiss of water beginning to spray throughout the store above us. The reaction was immediate and validating. Shrieks, unearthly electronic, yet unmistakably pained, echoed from above. The chittering became frantic, discordant. It's working, Dave breathed. They don't like water. That won't hold them forever, I cautioned. Let's get everyone out while they're disoriented. We moved quickly to the drainage tunnel entrance, removing the grate and organizing people into a line. Zoe went first to guide the way, while I stayed toward the back to make sure everyone made it. The sounds from upstairs were changing. The shrieks had lessened, replaced by deliberate thumping movements. They were searching, methodically moving through the store despite the sprinklers. Then came a new sound, a scraping against the basement door. They'd found us. Hurry, I urged the remaining people. Just Dave, myself, and an elderly man who was moving slowly due to what looked like a bad hip. The basement door began to buckle, the metal shelf in front of it sliding inch by inch across the concrete floor. Go, I told Dave, helping him guide the elderly man into the tunnel entrance. I'll be right behind you. But as Dave and the man disappeared into the tunnel, the door finally gave way. The shelf toppled forward with a crash, and through the doorway came 3 of the alien creatures, their segmented bodies somehow more terrifying in the dim emergency lighting. I stood frozen, caught between the tunnel entrance and the advancing aliens. One raised its biological weapon, aiming directly at me. In that frozen moment, I remembered my computer science studies, and a crazy idea formed. These creatures, despite their biological appearance, were technology far beyond ours. Technology meant systems, programming, inputs, and outputs. What inputs could I control? The fire alarm panel was just a few feet away. Next to the sprinkler control was the alarm itself, 120 decibels of ear-piercing noise designed to be unbearable to human ears. I lunged for it, slamming my hand against the glass-covered switch. The alarm blared at full volume, the sound amplified by the concrete walls of the basement. The effect on the aliens was instantaneous and dramatic. They recoiled, their limbs contorting in what could only be pain. The pulsing organs on their faces expanded and contracted rapidly, as if they were hyperventilating. One dropped its weapon, its 3-fingered hands clawing at where ears might have been if they had any visible ones. I didn't wait to see more. I dived into the drainage tunnel, crawling as fast as I could along the wet concrete tube. Behind me, I could still hear the alarm, but it was quickly drowned out by the rush of water as I approached the exit. The tunnel led out exactly where I remembered, a concrete outlet pipe that emptied into the small creek behind the shopping center. Zoe was waiting there, her face lighting up with relief when she saw me. "Thank God," she said. "I thought you weren't coming." "Had to make a dramatic exit," I replied, trying to joke despite the terror still coursing through me. "Where is everyone?" "We're gathering in the woods," she said, pointing to a dense stretch of trees that ran along the creek. Dave thought it would provide better cover. As we made our way to the group, I noticed the alien ships were now moving, shifting position over the city. One was directly above our shopping center, its jellyfish-like tendrils dangling closer to the ground than before. I think we triggered something, I told the group as we huddled among the trees. They're reacting to the water and the alarm. It seemed to hurt them. So what now? Asked a teenage boy, his voice cracking. We can't exactly turn on all the sprinklers in Denver. No, I agreed. But we know something about them now. They have vulnerabilities. And knowledge is the first step toward defense. As afternoon turned to evening, we moved deeper into the wooded area, following the creek south. From our elevated position on a small hill, we could see more of the city. Fires had broken out in several locations. The alien craft continued their ominous hover, occasionally descending lower over specific areas. We saw distant flashes of light that might have been military resistance, but they seemed sporadic and ultimately ineffective. Occasionally, we spotted groups of the spider-like aliens moving through neighborhoods, sometimes returning to their ships carrying cocooned humans. We kept hidden, moving only when necessary and in small groups to avoid detection. By nightfall, we had joined forces with another group of survivors who had fled from an apartment complex near the shopping center. They had their own story of narrow escape, their own observations about the invaders. One woman, a biology professor, was particularly interested in my notes about their reaction to water and sound. Their sensory organs must be highly sensitive, she theorized. Perhaps evolved for a very different environment than Earth. Our planet might be inherently hostile to them in ways we haven't fully discovered yet. Then why come here? Asked Dave. Why invade a planet that's toxic to you? Resources, suggested a man who introduced himself as a geologist. Earth has something they need badly enough to risk exposure. Water maybe, or specific minerals. Or us, said the biology professor quietly. Those cocoons, they're taking people alive for a reason. That sobering thought hung over the group as we established a makeshift camp in a clearing that offered good visibility of our surroundings while providing tree cover from above. We rationed the food and water people had managed to bring from a store, organized watch shifts, and tried to process the enormity of what was happening. I found myself unable to sleep despite exhaustion. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those pulsating sensory organs, those inhuman limbs moving with terrible precision. Instead, I sat with Zoe on a fallen log at the edge of our camp, watching the distant city. You know what's strange? She said after a long silence. This morning I was worrying about paying my student loans. Seems ridiculous now. I nodded. I was annoyed that my lunch break was an hour away. Now I'm not sure I'll ever punch a time clock again. What do you think happens next? She asked, hugging her knees to her chest. I mean long term. If they can't be stopped. I considered this. Humanity adapts. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars. We learn their weaknesses. We find ways to fight back. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually. She smiled faintly. That's weirdly optimistic for someone who just saw his workplace invaded by alien spiders. Retail teaches you resilience, I joked. After dealing with Black Friday shoppers, alien invaders aren't that intimidating. We both laughed. The sound strange and almost inappropriate in our dire circumstances, but necessary. A small moment of humanity in the face of the inhuman. Around 10 p.m., a new development caught our attention. One of the largest alien ships was descending toward the downtown area, lower than any had gone before. As it neared the ground, a brilliant blue light emanated from its center, forming a column that touched down in what we estimated to be Civic Center Park. Through a pair of binoculars someone had brought, we took turns observing. The light appeared to be some kind of transport mechanism. Aliens were moving up and down it, some carrying cocoons, others empty-handed, returning to the surface. They're setting up something permanent, the biology professor observed. A base of operations, perhaps. Or a processing center for the people they're taking, added the geologist grimly. Whatever it was, it confirmed one thing. This wasn't a hit-and-run attack. The aliens were establishing themselves, beginning what looked like long-term operations. This wasn't just an invasion. It was the start of an occupation. As midnight approached, marking 12 hours since the first ships appeared, I found myself thinking about the rhythm of retail life that had defined my days for 5 years. The morning rush, the lunch crowd, the afternoon lull, the evening shoppers. The constant cycle of restocking, inventory, customer service. That world was gone now, replaced by something unimaginable. Yet here I was, still organizing, still helping, still thinking about resource management and group dynamics. My job had been mundane, often thankless, but somehow it had prepared me for this moment, this first day of a new, terrifying reality. I am Marcus Chen, a grocery store clerk, and I survived the first 12 hours of the alien invasion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and perhaps new opportunities to fight back. But for now, in this moment of relative quiet, as I gazed at the transformed skyline of Denver, I allowed myself to acknowledge a simple, powerful truth. We were still here, still human, still alive. And as long as that remained true, Earth wasn't lost.